Great. Welcome, everybody. We are here today with Betsey and really excited to have her. I'm excited to sit back and listen to this one. I know that this one is going to be good for me, but we're welcoming you all today. My name is Rebecca Soni. I'm one of the co-founders of Rise Athletes along with Caroline. And we're here just trying to bring information, people, faces, Olympians to you guys so that you can keep working on today your goals and dreams and listening in, and keep working on yourself even in this time of quarantine and confusion. So Rise Athletes, we are all about building mindset and building community and connection. The program itself is a mentoring platform where you can connect one-on-one with Olympic athletes to train on mindset. Betsey is one of our fantastic mentors, and along with a team of about 15 other Olympians, we're just really excited to be able to connect with you in this new and exciting way. So with that, I'll pass over to Caroline, who's going to be hosting along with Betsey today. And yeah, welcome everybody.
Awesome. Thanks, Reb. As she said, I'm Caroline. Reb and I worked together and founded Rise a couple of years ago, I guess more than a couple of years ago, but it's been a pleasure to see all of you guys on these screens over the past couple of weeks as well. As she mentioned, the individual mentoring is really cool, but seeing everybody on here is even more impressive. So again, I'm in Southern California, and today we're gonna be talking with Betsey Armstrong, who's, if you can see her, I don't know if we have gallery view up or if we have big view up, Betsey will be on here in a second. And we're gonna discuss a lot about vision and goals. And something that is really important about Betsey is that she's not only a Olympic medalist, this successful athlete, she's an incredible human being. And she has cultivated her life outside of the sport based on her experiences in the sport, and is passing on this information to her athletes, to parents, to coaches, and to her world through her mentoring, through her yoga, through her family, through her life. So today we're going to learn a lot about not only vision and goals, but Betsey's life and how she's framed all of this. So Betsey, I'll hand it over to you and you can intro yourself a little bit.
Thanks, Caroline. Thanks, Reb. I'm really excited to be here with all of you today, and want to, before we get going, just share a little bit about my background as a water polo player. For those of you that are really familiar with the sport, that are coming here from a water polo background, and those of you that aren't and just curious, to hear about, just general Olympic and athlete experience. I grew up in the state of Michigan. So I was born and raised in Ann Arbor, Michigan, which I lived there through the end of attending college. So I went to the University of Michigan as well. And if you're familiar with water polo, it's not exactly the central hotbed location that's cranking out Olympic water polo players. And so I had a fairly, normal track in the sport. I was the youngest of 3 kids, and my older sister, who is 4 years older, played water polo, and, I followed her into the sport. And it wasn't until late in my high school career that I was, kind of began getting identified on the fringe of what is now our Olympic development program. At that time, it was something completely different. But I made sort of a youth C team and a junior Pan American team for one trip, and, started getting a little bit of identification, by the end of my junior year in high school, which now, as we have young athletes that are looking at going to college, that process starts much earlier than that. So at that time, I was, recruited to play at a handful of schools, decided to stay at home at Michigan. We had a brand new program there. I had the opportunity to be coached by an Olympic silver medalist, current national team player, goalkeeper. So I decided to stay home and close to home and get this phenomenal coaching, which I had for a year. And then I played 4 years in college. And, after that, I graduated from the University of Michigan, actually declined an invitation to attend a national team tryout. I had played for 4 years straight, one of the only goalkeepers that played for 4 years at that school. Was feeling a little burnt out, wanted to explore life, outside of my sport. And it was the following year in 2006. So I graduated from college in 2005. And then in 2006, I attended a national team tryout, an open tryout. And from that point forward, I started my career with the national team, which led me up to the Beijing Olympics in 2008, where our team won a silver medal, and decided to stay another 4 years, and go for another Olympic Games, where we ultimately won a gold medal in London. And so we'll talk a little bit. I know, I'll share some from both of those experiences today, and how, vision, goal setting, and creating a vision, and, understanding my own value set, really played a big role in both of those experiences, that entire experience, but really both of those Olympic experiences.
Incredible. I was at the 2012 Olympics watching my brother and Rebecca. And after, seeing all of you guys talk about the 2012 Olympics, I'm like, why didn't I go watch water polo? Like, I should have gone and watched water polo.
It was a fun tournament.
Okay. Well, so that being said, you've got Beijing and you've got London. And as we talk about vision and goals today, we're going to talk about some of the differences between both of those games, what showed up for you in both of those games. So we're going to put up a picture of both Beijing and London. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what comes up for you when you see these photos, and a little bit about both of these experiences in terms of your vision and goals going into it.
Right. So, these two photos that you can see are pretty dramatically different, I would say. I was looking through these old photos and photos of our, 2008 Olympic experience and 2012 Olympic experience, and had a lot of different emotions coming up. You can see that's me on the right of the 2008 picture, and then that's our entire team in London on the right. And it's hard to say now, being 12 years ago, I guess, were the Beijing Games. And, obviously having an Olympic silver medal from that experience is, I can say it's one of the most, it's been the most influential experiences of my life, because of everything that it, obviously just winning a silver medal is huge. And then, everything that it sort of put me into after that, how I sort of dived into my own work, leading up to 2012. But I think, what's interesting to point out, when you are playing a team sport at an Olympic Games and you take home a silver medal, you end your final game with a loss. And so that's, the picture that you're seeing on the left is, after we lost to Holland in the gold medal match in Beijing. And, what's so heartbreaking is, our main goal and our vision for Beijing was to win a gold medal. And, if you're familiar with the history of our women's water polo team, it's been an Olympic sport on the women's side since Sydney, since 2000. So USA won a silver medal in Sydney in 2000. They took home a bronze medal in Athens in 2004. And so Beijing was really kind of just culturally within our Olympic program on the women's side was our time. It was all of the learning that, everyone had underwent from Sydney to Athens, and now Beijing was our time. It's like, okay, we've been through this a couple of times. Now we're going to go in and dominate. And clearly, not only did we lose that game, it was just sort of a heartbreaking way in which we lost it. And so what happened was, I went on after this, kind of questioning whether or not I was going to continue, and, what really the sport, what I had left within the sport, and, how I wanted to remember my Olympic experience and my experience on the national team, and ultimately decided to come back, but was motivated in a lot of different ways to understand myself as a person and understand, where sort of the disconnect was that we had leading up to Beijing. We had won a world championship in 2007. We were the favorite team going into the Beijing Games. And then we ended up really kind of getting our butts kicked in the beginning of the final game. After the first quarter, we played Holland in the gold medal match. And after the first quarter, we were down 4-0 and had to fight our way back into that game, and traded goals for a while, but ultimately lost. So really what I'm going to get into today is, talking about goals and talking about creating a vision for ourselves, and how that integrates with our goal setting, and really what the differences are, and how there isn't always a perfect formula to get from point A to point B.
Yeah, and learning that something that has worked before may be different as it goes, right? And you obviously had to pivot and change things as you went on to London. So I want to talk a little bit about the difference between vision and goals. And I think this is something that can often be a little confusing for people, because it was for me. Sometimes it still is for me, because I think differently, right? Or I think I need to think like somebody else, or, you know, believe whatever someone else has laid out as like, maybe this is what you should do. Or, you know, I'm like, well, how do I do it? What does that mean? How do I do this? So I'd love to talk a little bit about the difference between visions and those big goals. And we're going to put up some definitions of between the two and have you discuss that a little bit.
Yeah. And so, you know, and I'll share this all within the context of those two experiences as well, obviously. But I think, you know, for me, a vision has always been where your identity fuses with your goal. So as athletes and as people, and, you know, we're always looking to identify these things that we want to do in life. And, you know, that is in many different areas, not exclusively to sport, you know, but we're looking at kind of the next thing we want to grow into, and the next thing we want to check off whether it's checking off our list or for whatever reason we want to do it. All of these different things that we want to get up to. And the vision is really, it is your big goal, but it's kind of surrounded by the person that you are. And I like to think of it as a really holistic take on your goal. And, you know, it's sort of multidimensional because it isn't limited to a single time and space. So like when I look at those two Olympic experiences, right, like my goal for both of those Olympic games was to win a gold medal. You know, that was my goal. But my vision, you know, for who I was when I was going to be there, and everything that I had experienced and all of the ways in which I grew leading up to that point, was a lot different between 2008 and 2012. And I think the biggest difference was just that I gave it a lot more thought in 2012. I was forced to really examine why it was that I wanted to win a gold medal, and then the ways in which I wanted to grow personally throughout that experience. And, you know, the example that I use is that, you know, I was on a team with 12 other women, and, you know, our collective goal, all of our individual goals and our collective goal was to win a gold medal. But, you know, on the podium, when we're, you know, being awarded, when we're listening to the national anthem and we're standing there with our medals around our neck, my vision of my experience could be quite different than my teammate's vision standing next to me, despite the fact that our goal was the same, to be there. So as we're setting goals, and as I work with my athletes and, you know, the players who I coach, and any other person in life, when I'm talking about setting goals, you know, goals are important. They're measurable. They allow us to understand our progress. They allow us to, you know, see what's working, identify ways in which we need to pivot and adjust. You know, they're somewhat linear, and it gives us this opportunity to get confidence in our growth. But I always encourage, you know, this is where, you know, I think understanding your values as a person and as an athlete becomes really important. So I think that, you know, it's this much bigger process to create a vision for yourself than it is to set a giant goal.
Really helpful. I remember something that I did in college was write my goals on a Post-it note and put it in my locker. But I made sure to color code them and, you know, understand some things were images that were, you know, very specific that helped me identify with a goal, and other things were words or specific times or goals that I wanted to hit. And I think now that I'm getting a little bit older and understanding the difference between the visions and the goals, sometimes I wish I could go back and create that experience again with the knowledge that I have now. Is there something that you like to do for that, like with your athletes or for yourself, to make it tangible?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm a big journaler, and I, for those of you that follow Rise closely, there's an awesome blog that we put out a couple weeks ago about how to journal and strategies and tips for how to develop a journaling practice and keep it regular. And so I often think a journal is a great way to do this, but you can also just take a sheet of paper. So what I do is, whether it's in your journal or on a blank sheet of paper, you can fold it in half or use one side of the page and the other. And what I recommend is, on one side of the paper, you write down a goal. You write down a really big goal. That's something that's important to you. It can be, something that you want within the next year, or it can be something like a lifetime goal. And so I just want you to write that goal on one side of the piece of paper. And then on the other side, I want you to write down the person that you want to be when you accomplish that goal. And so that can be obviously what kind of person, but then what kind of leader, what kind of teammate, what kind of community member, what kind of family member, what kind of, daughter or son or brother or sister, and you can really, again, think holistically about this and then look at those things, and that will give you some insight into the values that you want to develop as you're working towards this goal. And it will give you some insight into why this is important to you. Yeah, we can take a few minutes to think about that.
I'm starting mine now. Are we allowed to do that now?
Yes, absolutely. I have a couple I can do too.
Okay. And they can be several, like on the other side of the paper from the biggest goal, we can write down several different forms of ourselves that we want to be, right? Like a bunch.
Absolutely. And there's no wrong way to do this. So you can write, you can write in paragraph form, the way you see yourself, and or you can, I always recommend starting with exercises like this, starting with bullet points, and again, it can be like you're characterizing your values on the other side of who you are when you accomplish this goal. And from there, that just, again, if this is new, it just kind of sparks the thought and you can get more creative.
I love it. I love stuff like that.
I know. Well, it's really inspiring, especially during times like this, for everyone. And I'm more than happy to share mine and talk a little bit about how I came to this.
Go for it whenever you're ready.
So I've had a life goal for a long time to run a marathon. And that is something that, just given being a water athlete and all of, my sport commitment, and then becoming a mom a couple years ago, twice, has not really happened for me yet. And I really, at the end of last year, at 2019, I had this opportunity to, go in with a team to run a marathon later this year, which is yet to be determined if it's going to happen. But going into 2020, I was like, this is my year. This is it. I'm going to do it. And here we are. But I'm still, in the mindset that this is going to happen, and we'll see how everything develops with, all of our sporting events going on. But so on my paper, I wrote run a marathon on one side. And then on the other side, I have tough, fluid and flexible, resilient, and compassionate. And for the compassionate, I have two subpoints: compassionate to myself and compassionate to my family. And, for all of these, this is when I envisioned myself running a marathon. And, I'm going into this without, which is hard for me as, being an Olympic athlete that's had a very successful sporting career in my life, it's hard for me to go into anything without, being competitive and wanting to, I don't anticipate winning this by any means, but of course I want to push myself. But, I know that the resilience that I will need in order to work toward this goal, it's going to be, it's going to take a lot of learning. I'm not a runner. I'm not a long distance runner. I am a water person. So it's going to take I'm going to have to be tough, and I'm going to fail a lot, And then the fluidity and the flexibility comes in because, I have to be able to adjust. I mean, I have 2 young kids. I have a husband who travels all of the time. And, again, I'm having had the sporting career that I've had, I'm used to, this is my program and I'm following it. And, this is my formula and I'm going to get there, right? Like if I follow this formula, I'm going to be able to run a marathon. So I really am going to do my best to harness my flexibility, my fluidity, and just be able to adjust, even in the times that it sort of drives me crazy. And then that's, where the compassion piece comes in. And that's where it's going to be really important to me to be compassionate to myself and not, get really hung up on, oh my gosh, I didn't get this run in on this day. I'm not going to, I'm never going to be able to run this marathon if I don't get this one long run in this 1 week, and then, so I'm going to have to really be self-compassionate. And that's where, a lot of our self-worth comes from too. So knowing, like if I can be compassionate with myself, and I can show up again the next day, and then with my family, because I, again, I have my plan and I have my program and I'm going to want to follow that. But I also have a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old who don't really understand that, what it means to run a marathon. So, I'm going to have to be compassionate to my family when I'm not able to get everything done that I want to get done. So
I love that. Running a marathon.
That's my vision. That's my visions for when I run my marathon. These are all of the ways in which I'm really going to grow and everything that it's going to teach me.
Yeah. And, everybody on this screen is capable of achieving something that has been dreamt of and visualized and created in our minds. And I know it's powerful to make it tangible and to write that down. So before we move on, we want to take a stab and see if anybody would like to come on and share their goal and subsequently the things that, as on the other side of your paper. Would anybody like to? And if you'd like to, you can either drop a chat or raise your hand in the little reaction section of the. And if nobody goes, I'm definitely going to go. Why not? Oh, I think we saw, was that Natalie or someone just raised their hand, I think. Natalie, did you want to go? Yeah.
Yeah. So I made it a goal for next water polo season to be on first team all section. And I said that when I get there, like I want to be the first one in the water and like last one out all practices. And I want to be like confident in my performance, like even if I'm not performing well. And then I want to be really resilient, and I want to like encourage my team and make sure that they're committed.
Awesome. I love it. It's so, it's just so, what I think is really great about this is it brings these values out because, Natalie, these are things that we can't always guarantee the outcome of the goal, right? Like we can't always guarantee, like there are so many external factors when it comes into setting goals and, competing in a sport where there's other, you don't know how someone else is training and how other teams are preparing, and we don't know how officiating is going to be. And there's so many different factors, but the value on the other side of this sheet of paper and the value and the vision that we have, that is something that is within our control. And all of these lessons that we will be offered from now until, your sectionals, all of this time, like as hard as it may be on some days, like there's every day to grow. Like you said, you have control that you can be the first in the water and the last one out, and you can inspire your teammates in that way. And that's huge. And that's where, our identity as athletes can be bigger and trickle into other areas of our life. I love it.
Absolutely. That was great. Thank you, Natalie. It was awesome. Would anybody else like to share? And I know some of you guys don't have videos, so if you want to raise your hand in the reaction. And totally fine if not. I would like to share maybe.
Yeah, let's hear it.
I'm doing this because lately I've been finding it really hard to articulate myself in a way that feels like I know what I'm trying to say. So this is practice for me. This is good reps.
Yeah.
I have always wanted to start a swimwear line, and I went to school for it when I retired swimming, like as I was retiring swimming. And this was 10 years ago. So it's been 10 years that I've wanted to do it. And recently I started it, and quarantine happened and COVID happened. So I'm currently in the process of, it is paused and on hold. So it was kind of a bummer because it's a big bump in the road, and I don't really know when things will, pick back up again, because I was in the sample section of doing it. So on the other side of my paper, I wrote fluid, Betsey, creative, expansive, open, and living by example, not just talking about it, but like creating it and living my goal instead of just trying to like shove things in people's faces, but being that person. So for me, that just feels like more of an expansive energy.
Yeah, and that's huge, and that's what it is, right? I mean, it's not just going to be about the swimwear line, I mean, that's the big goal, and the creativity will allow you to find your way there, and these are all of the things that you'll unpack along your journey that, when it's there and when it's, manifested in front of you, and, you're there making your suits, it'll be all of this stuff. It's really cool.
And I love too, as I was listening to everyone that shared, to me, it's those values that you are working on the way towards that goal almost feel more important than the goal itself. So you're walking away with this, like, I have this fluidity, and I have this compassion for myself and for my family, and I have these things. And it's really cool how oftentimes we talk about, in swimming, that people might ask, what was your favorite thing or your favorite race? And it's like, well, that Olympics was great, but like the teammates and the camaraderie and all these, enjoy the moment type of things that are not quite as big and loud as like, oh, I won an Olympic gold medal, but they stay with you for the rest of your life. So this is how you're like fine tuning and crafting yourself within the goals that you're moving towards. And that's what keeps it progressive from goal to goal to goal. So, once our swimming careers for Caroline and I were over, and for anyone else who's finished their career, that keeps going. It's not the end, it's a progression. So yeah, I would love to, as Caroline just dropped in the chat, or if you want to share what some of those values were. You don't necessarily have to share your goal if you don't want to, but just kind of putting it out there, sharing it with the group, as well as just like Caroline said, using your voice. And that has power too, of saying like, I'm going in this direction. So feel free to drop it in the chat as we move along here.
And Reb, we have one more, Leah Green just messaged me and said that she'd love to share. So Leah, I think whenever you'd like to, we would love to hear from you. Oh, I think she's muted. Oh, there we go. There we go.
Hi. I really want a splash ball coach for some of our younger players in my area. And I feel like if I complete that goal, I feel like I'll be a better like influence and know how to understand how to help other players in my area.
Nice. Yeah. So you want to be a splash ball coach. You want to start a splash ball team. And so are you still playing?
Yeah. Like rec teams around our area that I would want to help coach at.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's awesome. And you know what I have found, and I think Caroline and Rebecca can also attest to this, is that, when you become someone who's interested in sharing everything that you love about your sport, and so for those of you that aren't familiar with what splash ball is, it's a program that's through USA Water Polo that you basically get young kids exposed to the sport, and they get to play and learn all about you know, what water polo is, and just have fun and get familiar with the ball. And so what I think is great, Leah, is, you know, you wanting to teach these kids, you know, things about water polo and why it's, you know, a fun sport and everything that they can learn from it. And that's going to make you, you know, like exude that to your teammates and play, you know, like you're going to be that. It develops your leadership, and it, you know, like develops your passion, and that's really, really awesome and valuable. And what I was saying is that anytime we, you know, want to share, you know, this experience with others, it's really inspiring for ourselves. And it's going to present you with all of these creative ways that you can, you know, connect with your teammates and share this, you know, this joy and bring everyone together.
That's awesome. Thank you, Leah. That was great. It's empowering to speak it. And as Reb said, the values are one of the most important things, because they'll be the foundation and the underlying things that you go back to for everything that you execute in your life. And speaking of execution of that, we're going to now segue a little bit into actually making this happen. Like, what can we do in our daily lives to start taking steps to creating what we really want? And I think this is something that we all want to know, right? Like, everybody wants to know, how do I do it? How do I get there? How do I do it? And as Reb also said, and as Betsey have said, there's no end to anything, really. Like, everything is a continuum. Everything is an ongoing process, no matter what. Like, Olympic gold medalists feel the same way about their process in a lot of ways as a 12-year-old, you know, that is like, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know how to do this. I just need to figure out how. That's the beauty of it. So we're gonna put up on the screen a bunch of different ways that we can bring these to life, and Betsey's gonna talk through them. And you guys can take a photo of this on your phone or take some notes in your notebook as she's speaking if you wish.
Yeah, so, you know, when you're coming up with your vision and you know, your goals, step number one is always to kind of make a plan, right? I think it's, you know, the step number one here where it says make a plan and then journal, you know, you can make a plan in your journal. Journaling, I think, should be in every category, you know, as I'm talking about this and as I'm utilizing it. But making a plan, understanding, you know, like what it's going to take to get from point A to point B, you know, if your goal is to go to the Olympics or if your goal is to win your conference, you know, what wins do you need to have along the way? What teams do you need to make? Who do you need to talk to? How do you get identified? And, you know, setting these goals, you know, within your plan. So obviously, like, you know, you can make a training program, you can set your goals along the way. And a really important piece of this first part is identifying support systems. That's something that I don't think as a player I utilized enough until I was actually offered support from people. But this is how you learn how to advocate for yourself and learn how, you know, to ask for help from your teammates, from your coaches, from your mentors, and vocalizing your plan. Like, tell people about what it is that you want to do, you know, and don't be shy and don't be ashamed of that. Like, you know, we all deserve to want something great, and that's important. And we, you know, we deserve to want something, we deserve to want to be the best at something, and that's okay. And so as you make this plan and as you start to dive into the work, again, you're really going to want to reflect along the way. And this is, you know, hearing Caroline and Rebecca and myself, you know, talk about this from our experience, where this is where the work is infinite, right? Self-study, developing your self-awareness. Those of you that I've coached that are on this call have heard me probably say this ad nauseum over and over again, that it is my opinion that an athlete is, you know, develops self-awareness in 3 different ways. You become incredibly self-aware in your physical body and, you know, managing, you know, tough workouts and, you know, what it is that you're capable of. You become incredibly self-aware mental and emotionally. So when it gets hard, how do you respond? How do you react to, you know, adversity? And I'm not saying you need to change it, but you get that insight into who you are once, you know, you start getting uncomfortable. And then socially, it makes you self-aware socially. You have to, you know, interact with your coaches, interact with your teammates, and you have to manage, you know, adversity in those senses as well. And you have to work with other people regardless of your sport. And so the self-study is huge, and that's what's going to keep you present within these goals. So you make your plan, you start to dive into the work that you have to do, and you learn about yourself along the way. So the next step is work. There's no way around it. For whatever it is that we're going to do in our sport or in life, we have to learn how to work hard. And, you know, that comes from following a training program from your coaches, but it also comes from learning how to make adjustments that you need to take. And with that hard work, you have to take risks and take chances. All right. And this is where I think, you know, it can be a challenge for an athlete, right? Because when we're coached, you know, like we're following a program, and when we're on a team, you know, we're within our team and we're working together, you know, towards winning matches or winning your race or, you know, winning your game. And so how do I figure out how to take risks? How do I figure out, you know, what it is? And that can be within your sport. You know, maybe you're going to take, if you're a water polo player, you're going to take a shot that you might not normally take, and you're going to shoot the ball instead of passing it, or you're going to pass it instead of shoot it. But it's also, you're going to take a risk at maybe sharing how something is making you feel with a teammate or with a coach, or, you know, if your plan isn't working, you know, you have to take a chance at looking at something that might not be working. And then from there, the willingness to adjust, right? And that's where the fluidity and the flexibility comes in, right? We all love to hang on to our plans, and we love to follow the formula, and there's comfort in that. And, you know, it's in a perfect world that would guarantee us a certain outcome, but we have to be able to look at that plan and make adjustments and pivot. And then from there, I think along throughout this entire process, so from the top of the list through the bottom, you're going to find that you recalibrate your values and you recalibrate your experience. And so what I mean by that is that, you know, between, you know, I was fortunate enough to be on the women's national team for almost a decade. And in the beginning of that journey for me, the stuff that was important was very different than the stuff that was important at the end of that journey. And it came throughout all of this work, right? And so when you look at these broad strokes of your experience, you know, and this is why a journal is just great, because you get to go back and like see, I mean, Caroline and Rob, have you guys ever read your journals from like the beginning of your like college or the beginning of your national team experience? I mean, I've shared that with some of my athletes, and, you know, to go back and read that and to just have the perspective of how things change and grow and shift. And like I said here, pivot and just, you know, kind of get filtered out a little bit, which is cool.
Betsey, what would you say was the single biggest change you made from 2008 to 2012? Going into 2012, like, and, you know, according to this, would you say, like, what spot were you like, you know what, I did that better and committed to that, and that made all the difference?
Yeah, you know, I think between 2009 and 2012, so between the London Games, training in that 4-year period, I had to swallow my ego in a much different kind of way. And I don't want to, you know, I don't mean to say like I had some big ego before 2008, because that wasn't the case. But what I had to do was look at my blind spots, you know, or discover my blind spots and then look at them. And in ways that I, you know, wanted to train, you know, there was just, like I said, so I don't know if I said this earlier, but leading up to the 2008 games, you know, we had such a strong team. I mean, we were the best team in the world. And I will say that even with winning a gold medal, we were the best, you know, like water polo players in a lot of ways in the world. But we were so committed to this system of play where we all had our own role and we all did that together. And it was very mechanical and very methodical. And in a lot of ways, it was really black and white. And I think our biggest weakness was that we never really wanted to understand that there were gray areas, and we didn't really look at those gray areas. It was always either like, it was sort of like, if you do this, this will work and we will be successful, you know? And in 2009 to 2012, we had to do a lot of work, both as you know, the players on the team, and, you know, our coaching staff had to learn this in a lot of ways too, that we play a sport where there is gray area, and we have to, we don't know what that gray area is. It's like it's like a black hole, right? Like we just don't know. And, we're going to have to constantly put ourselves in a situation where when we're presented with something unexpected that we don't like, or, the adversity, we're going to have to be able to come up with a plan in the moment and come up with a plan together and collectively that will, can get us through that. And so personally for me, that meant, I was the starting goalkeeper in 2008 and I was the starting goalkeeper in 2012. And I would say in my 2008 experience, it was much, again, we all had our roles. In 2012, I started the majority of that quad, but it was never like, you're the starting goalkeeper. It was very like, we're all in a much more even playing field, and, there were a lot of other players that were really good and could have easily played just as well as I did, and they were given an opportunity. And so it's just, it's the sense of I had to, allow myself to feel uncomfortable with that and not be so secure in my role. And, and that's why it became really important for me to understand, okay, well, what is this for me? And when I get to the end, is this something I want if I'm not comfortable and starting all the time and playing all the time and making the big saves all the time? Mm-hmm. The first game in the 2012 tournament in London, we beat Hungary in our opening match, but we beat them. I think the score was 14-13. So I got scored on 13 times in that first game, which is pretty high for water polo alone, let alone at the Olympics. So, that was a kind of tough way for me to start the tournament. And I will say it was all of the work that we had to do leading up to that time that, gave me the confidence and like not running away from just being like, oh my, not spiraling out, I guess. And oh my God, I just got scored on 13 times. And on the Olympics, like the first game of the tournament, I had to just check myself and say, all right, it's time to drop into the next game. So.
Well said. Really well said. We actually have quite a few questions on some of those topics you just touched on from people that submitted their questions. I'm going to get to those in a second, but we do have Zamira, I believe, on the call that wanted to share before we move on. So we'll let her share.
So my goal is not only to be like the best on my team, so like to be one of the best and well-known synchronized swimmers in the world. Because I started from a difficult time, from an injury that took like almost a year to recover from. But when I get there, I want to be humble and confident, but helpful and inspiring and hardworking. And I want to remember where I started and not get like cocky.
I love that. And I think, for all of us right now going through this period of our lives where, we aren't going to practice and we're home and everything is on pause. And, we've been spending a lot of time talking to athletes and talking to coaches and talking to teams. In some ways, anyone who's dealt with an extended injury, this time is a little bit like that, right? I mean, except we're all going through it together. And something that, you can really take away from that experience, you said you started your career, going through an injury is, that really is an important time because it forces you to ask these questions about why. Like, why do I want to come back to this? Why am I gonna, withstand this period of time where I can't be getting in the water with my teammates and, I can't be practicing. So it really commits us to the values and the vision that we want to have on the other side of this experience. And I love that. I mean, I think being inspiring and being humble and, having confidence, I mean, that all goes hand in hand, and it's like I kind of touched on before, we all deserve to want great things and we can still do that and be all of those things. So we can still, want to finish in the best position that we can finish. That's important to us. And you can still bring all of those other values with you. None of them negate another value in any way, shape, or form.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing. I love these shares.
Yeah.
It creates such a community feeling that like no one's alone in that, in these things that we experience and we're all supporting each other. And I also want to say before we segue into the Q&A that it's so like humbling to know that you can be at the top stage of where you're at and still feel, like you said, competition anxiety, or still feel like, I don't think I can do this. I don't know that I can do this. It can be a misconception. You see these Olympic athletes on screen, you see these people in these events, and it's like, sure, maybe they look a little nervous, but like, they're super people. Like, they don't have any fears at all. They're not thinking about anything. So one of the questions, or a bunch of the questions that we had submitted, which I love hearing these types of questions and also answers to them, are how do you deal with competition anxiety or a defeatist mentality, like I can't do it, I'm throwing in the towel, I need to just stop this. How do you deal with that? Maybe not only in competition, but in practice or in regular season. And how did you go through that, or tell a little bit of, give a few examples on that?
Totally. I think what you just said right there, Caroline, is really important, because I mean, I think many of us experience that in the big moments, right, in competition. And I will say the way that I was able to cope with that in a competition was because of the way that I trained. And going back to the slide that we had up earlier, there's the work section, and that's where, it's important to find that balance of pushing yourself for greatness and excellence to a point that you're going to fail, right? So I think it's important to push ourselves to excellence, to the point where we demand good things from ourselves, and we demand, quality work. Because it forces you to understand how possible that is 100% of the time. Like, we're human beings. All of us are. You're an Olympic medalist, or you're, a 12-year-old athlete. Like, we are all humans, and, we can't be firing on all cylinders at all the time. And something that's hard, it's going to be probably my life's work for the rest of my life. And I think, many of us can relate to that. And when we have the opportunity to develop our values as we're going through this, we will then have that to fall back on in those moments that we fail. So whether it's at training or whether it's in our competitions, if we understand all of these other ways in which we contribute value to our team and to this experience, then we're going to be able to get through it. And it's not going to be easy. It's never like, I hate failing. I hate losing. I hate getting passed by people. I hate, like, it will drive me nuts, probably 50% of the time. But, it's really important that I also can check myself in what it is that I know I bring value to, and what it is that I know that I'm good at. And that's important. And, it's what I mentioned before. It's not, it's not one thing or the other. It's not either or. We can be both. We can be both of those. We can fail at something and be really good at other things at the same time.
That's interesting. You say that. What comes to mind for me is thinking back to my career. And oftentimes when I felt that mentality of, I don't think I can do this, I just needed to have the conversation about that in general. And I think something that Reb and I are very passionate about, within the mindfulness of sport, is the ability to be mindful and aware of your thoughts, and be able to have that conversation about, this is what's coming up for me, and to open that instead of hiding it and holding it in. Because a lot of times athletes can put on the tough hat and be like, I don't need to just tell anybody that I'm feeling this, right? I mean, how many of us have done that? I did it every single day for years. Yeah, I just need to be tough. There's for sure a time and place to be tough. Of course, like, you're going to have to perform. You're going to have to do the things you need to do and step up and do that. But there's also a time and place to say, this is terrifying for me, and I don't know that I can do this right now, and I need to open up that conversation. Have you had an experience like that?
Absolutely. I mean, I feel like I'm telling people all the time, or throughout my athletic career, I really, on the Olympic level, our team was so close that, I was really fortunate in that I had people I could tell, weekly, like, hey, this is really hard for me. And my family, I mean, like, my family they were just my rock. I mean, there would be days that I would just call my parents crying about how hard practice was, and I didn't think I could make it. And, and it was important to me to have these sort of milestones and checkpoints that I would break it up, right? Like, Betsey, make it to the next tournament. You can make it at least to the next tournament, and then lo and behold, the next tournament rolls around and I've put in all this work and I've, been able to articulate how hard this is and what it means to me. And then, okay, like, I can do this, even if it wasn't a tournament that we won, but just to be able to get through that moment. I mean, we have those periods. It's like, the waves of our life. And I agree wholeheartedly, that being able to talk about that and acknowledge it is really powerful. And, I'm a yoga teacher, and this is something that comes up so much in my teaching for yoga, and this is how we practice mindfulness. I mean, when you're holding a yoga pose and your legs are burning and, you're gripping everywhere because you're so tense and you want to move out of this posture just so that you can, give yourself some relief, like, how are the ways in which we can also be compassionate with that experience and soften and just allow ourselves, to move a little bit and release some of that tension. These are all, really valuable ways of doing that.
Yes. And being able to communicate with your teammates. I know in swimming and some sports it's individual, but a lot of people on this call are in team sports. And so when you experienced that communication with your team, did it enhance your all's ability to perform? Like, you were able to perform better when you had clear and fluid communication versus like we're all doing one man for our own, like, eye for eye thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, and if you're a swimmer, I think, relays are huge like this too, right? Like, I mean, you guys, there are so many ways in which, there's a team within a team regardless of sport. And particularly as a goalkeeper in water polo, like, oftentimes I felt like I was an island, my whole team is like, they're all running a play, or they're all like, I'm helping them. You're like a quarterback on defense. I mean, you're making saves, but you're also like a quarterback directing people where to go on defense. And then, they're down there playing offense, which, like, I'd like to think I, contributed to, but like, they're scoring goals. So, I think it allowed me to then, in a game, if my confidence is wavering, there were certainly games, especially in the sport of water polo on the women's side internationally, there's probably, there's 8, maybe 10 international teams that are all going to be competitive with one another. And it's gotten a little bit more stratified now. The USA women's side has been winning handedly for a while, but, regardless of the gap on the scoreboard, it is always close and it is always tight. And it allowed me to share with my teammates if there was a shooter, like, hey, I need your help. Whatever reason, like, I'm struggling with the way she's shooting. She scored on me twice. Like, I'm feeling nervous about this. Like, can you put some extra pressure on that shooter? And it allowed me to be able to ask for help and, to understand, like, okay, I know Maggie's got her. I know Lauren's got her, like, they're going to have my back on this. And having developed that relationship over the course of all of our training and all of our travel and all of the time together, both in and out of the water, gave us the ability to communicate like that.
Incredible. I often think about what it would be like to be in that position on a team. Okay, so we are getting a little close on time, so we're going to end with one more question for you, Betsey, and then we'll close out. But everybody, if you have any last minute questions or things you'd like to say, you can always drop it in the chat, no problem. Yoga has become extremely important for you. What part of yoga has been the game changer? Like, there's different facets of yoga, right? Like, we learn all of the different styles and ways and get into pockets of it that are important. Rebecca's also so keyed and tuned in with yoga as well. I find it fascinating sometimes that we never did this when we were training even. I know it's more popular now, but how has that changed your life after sport? And would you suggest that being a part of what athletes can do now, different facets of it?
Totally. I speak about this a lot. And, I came to yoga as, during national team training, we'd have a summer season conclude after World Championships, and we get about a month to month and a half off. And I always practiced yoga during those times, mostly as a way, I go to these power yoga classes and I'd want to, just move my body in a different way, but still get a really good workout in. So it's always a very physical practice for me in the beginning. And it wasn't until I really became regular about it that it shifted for me, and it became this opportunity for me to slow down and really learn how to be present with my body physically and create space in my body physically. So once, I started incorporating yoga a little bit more during those periods of training where we were actually in training then, and I wasn't going to go do like some crazy power yoga class. And so I was forced to slow down a little bit and really feel how it was in my body to, again, be slow. Because as an athlete, we're constantly focused on faster and stronger and quicker and more power in our sport, which is what we need and the majority of the time to, make these gains and be successful. But we aren't responsible enough, I think, as a athletic culture and community to slow down. And, what I began to notice for me is when I would slow down and, I was able to learn how to stay present with my mind and keep myself focused throughout a, 45, 60-minute practice. I started really discovering how much space there was for me to relax and loosen in many ways. So what I touched on earlier was, you're holding this pose, you're standing in Warrior 2 or Warrior 1, and it's a very strengthening pose, but, I was able to somehow soften and somehow release and give myself some movement and some fluidity. And, that is a metaphor, I think, that we can take to so many different levels of our lives, again, mentally and emotionally and spiritually, and, within our sport and how we approach, our training, because it allows you to be many different things at once and accepting of that.
Accepting. I love it. Thank you. And we're going to answer Kate's, because this is a really great one. And this is also submitted before we close out, if that's okay, Betsy. I think it's
Yeah.
saying the goal is to be on the national team. Is that still a possibility, or did she have to be on a club or ODP team?
So, our women's national team, they're always watching players, and you don't have, like, many players go through the tradition. I would say, probably the majority of players there at some point participated in the Olympic development program and, made a youth team or a junior team, but it isn't to say that you have to. My own experience, I played on one junior team once in the summertime. You look at a player like our goalkeeper now, Ashley Johnson, she didn't join the national team until halfway through her college career. And so my advice for anyone who's looking to get identified is, keep playing, keep showing up to as much stuff as you can show up to. You're going to grow as a player in that. You're going to learn, you're going to grow as a person, all of the opportunities that you take advantage of. And then look at playing in college. If it doesn't happen for you and you don't get identified in high school, then, find out ways to play in college, and then, there are members of the national team that can join after you're done with college. I didn't join the national team until I was done, with college. And, talk to your coaches, tell your goal to people, put in the extra work, like saying these goals and dreams out loud, and then, finding ways that you can do the work that isn't necessarily the physically exhausting work all the time, but, the self work, and find the people you can talk to that can support you through this process.
Fantastic. This has been really helpful and like inspiring. So thank you so much, Betsy. And I'd like to thank everybody here for being here today. And I am going to propose something that just came to my mind. Betsy, on Instagram, you're at Betsey Armstrong, correct? And then Facebook.
No Facebook
page, but your page is up, correct?
Right. Yeah.
Find you. So if anyone here is on Instagram and likes to share their goals or their visions or do something that reminds you of this call today, my challenge is to tag Betsy or tag Rise Athletes and story it so that we can restory it. Because we've been getting some of that lately from athletes and from coaches and parents and everything, just really inspiring things or fun things or videos. So that would be really cool. And I'll do the same.
Awesome. Love it.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time today to do this. And I'm honored to know you and to have gotten to know you throughout these years of being a part of Rise. And you represent us well, and you represent our country well and the world well. And just thank you for being here.
Well, thank you guys. It's been a lot of fun.
Thanks, everyone. So we'll end on my favorite ending of I'm going to unmute everybody so you don't have to do anything, but you can feel free to say thank you to Betsey for being here. And thank you, everyone else who.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Everyone.
Thank you, Betsy.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.